You're listening to North Shore Now.
Welcome back to North Shore Now. I'm Jason Samel. My guest again is Congressman Tom Suozzi, and we're going to be talking a bit more about his time as his short time so far as congressman, his time in the past as Glen Cove mayor, and certainly one subject that I really want to hit on that Tom has recently had the opportunity to discuss with Joe Biden. Want to discuss some issues of gerrymandering. So Tom, tell me, how has things been as your first year in United States Congress?
Well, I really enjoy the job. I'm very honored to be in this position. I'm very humbled by it, quite frankly. And I serve on the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee. And, this is serious business. I've been to Afghanistan and met with the diplomats and the generals and the troops. And I've been to Kuwait and Jordan and the UAE as part of that trip. And I went to South Korea during Thanksgiving. And
now, when you listen, we constantly hear about in the news a politician went on a trip and went to some country. Okay, what are you actually doing there when you're there? What's going on there? What's your purpose? Is it just so you can learn what's happening there, or is it to visit there and give them a surprise? What is it?
It's to see in real life what's actually happening on the ground. I mean, when I went to Afghanistan, you show up at the airport. We had to take a military helicopter, over to
cool.
one of the air bases, and you get there. A guy shows you how to use a tourniquet. It's one of the first things they did. I said, "Come on, you're trying to scare us here." Last time somebody had to use a tourniquet here on one of these trips. So, but then you go and you go out and to see the different bases, and you talk to the troops and you talk to the generals about what's happening in the place that they are and what is their mission. And I talked to the ambassador, who was really charged affairs for Afghanistan. You talk to the different special forces and the spies and the different people that are in the region as to what's actually happening on the ground.
Does that have a great, when you come back, does that have a great effect on the decisions that you make of of the things that you want to work on, the things you want to get accomplished there?
Had a very big impact on me, certainly. And, I'm very convinced that when it comes to Afghanistan, that there's a very clear military policy that America has regarding trying to get the Afghan army so it's stable to handle this stuff itself, and the special forces of the Afghan army and the Afghan Air Force to work better with the Afghan army and a civilian police force, and the role of Pakistan in the region. And that's very, very clear. Yeah. But what's also clear to me is that there's no commensurate civilian strategy. Yeah. There's like a long list of things that America does and other countries do from multiple different departments of the government, and it's a long list. Yeah. But it's not a strategy. It's not a plan. It's a list of things. And there really is no comprehensive plan as to the civilian side. What are our goals as far as energy production so that they can have electricity? What are the goals as far as having teachers, as far as having judges and prosecutors, of having running water and sewer, and economic development? What is our, all this money is being spent from not only America but other countries as well. India just committed $3 billion towards rebuilding Afghanistan. Wow. Which is upsetting the Pakistanis, which is in between the two and has a long history with both countries, India and Pakistan and Afghanistan. Of course. But there's no clear-cut strategy. So when you're on these trips, when I went to North Korea. I'm sorry, not North Korea. They wouldn't let me into North Korea.
I was going to say
South Korea. I did put my foot over the line into North Korea, but I was in South Korea for Thanksgiving. And that was, that's in the midst of all this blustery talk that was going on at the time, last Thanksgiving. And part of that was to support the troops. I mean, I was thinking about not going because I hadn't, I had a my mother had passed away not long before that, and it was a holiday, with my kids and blah blah blah. And I was like, wow, these guys are stationed there in South Korea with all this stuff going on. I can give up my holiday and go support the troops, which I did. Great. But when you're there, you talk to the general in charge and the diplomats again, and you get a sense of what's really happening. I learned when I was in South Korea, which is a booming country. South Korea is economically booming. It's the 11th largest economy in the world.
I didn't realize
It's gone from being a country that received aid from many other countries to a country that gives aid to other places in one generation. And it's it's only dozens of miles away from the North Korean border to Seoul. There's 25 million people living there.
Yeah.
If there was ever a war, Seoul could be wiped out easily.
Yeah.
Why there's no war? It will never be the right solution for that part of the world. These people would get killed immediately. Yeah. It'd be devastating. It would be an awful, bloody, awful consequence.
Hopefully, God willing, we never have to see those days. So tell me, Tom, big issue of today, and an issue that I think is probably, if not the most biggest issue in the country, that's affecting our electoral politics, gerrymandering. Can you tell me exactly what that means?
First of all, it is the biggest issue. It's the most important issue in the country, and it's why everything is screwed up. And why
I mean, personally, I think big money in politics, corporate money in politics, is the number one issue. But I think that this is certainly a close second.
Corporate money would have much less influence. First of all, it's a big issue. Corporate money is a big issue. But corporate money would have a much less of an influence if we didn't have all these gerrymandered seats.
What does that mean?
It's every state is responsible for drawing the lines for not only their state legislatures, but for the congressional seats based upon the most recent census every 10 years.
Lines where? Like on a map?
Lines on a map as to where the congressional districts are. So,
it's not just split up. So it's not just split up evenly.
Well, it's split up evenly as far as the population amount, but there's often no rhyme or reason as to how the lines are drawn.
Oh, wow.
You see crazy shapes of districts all over the country because they're designed to pack in members of one party versus another party to ensure incumbent advantage or partisan advantage for the people that control the state legislature.
I think we're strongly affected by that here in our own area in Oyster Bay. There's been a lot of talk about that too.
Well, Oyster Bay is a town of Oyster Bay, so those lines don't change. This is for congressional seats and for state legislative seats. So in America, each congressional district has about 700 to 750,000 people in it, and congressional seats for the House of Representatives are apportioned based upon population. So the more people you have, the more seats you have. The less people you have, the less seats you have. So some states have one congressional seat. Other states have 40 seats or 25 seats. So the problem is technology and computer databases have gotten so sophisticated over the past 10 years that gerrymandering has become a very big art form. And we see states like Pennsylvania, where the Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania just declared their gerrymandering unconstitutional. They redid the maps, where the votes are often 50-50, 55-45 for statewide elections. But 80% of the seats or 75% of the seats are in one party versus another party. That doesn't make any sense. But
they just ruled on that recently, right?
The Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania ruled on it recently.
Yeah.
As far as the whole country goes, the Supreme Court had a case argued on October 5th to declare partisan gerrymandering unconstitutional. Yeah. I was one of the 30-some-odd members of Congress and former members of Congress that signed a friend of the court brief
to
declare partisan gerrymandering unconstitutional. And there's a second case being argued right now before the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court was to rule that partisan gerrymandering is unconstitutional, it would be the most important thing that happened in our country's politics in 50 years because it would force politicians to listen to the people.
That's it.
Right now, they don't listen to the people because they can't lose. The only ones they listen to
let's not include you in that they, because you certainly listen to the people with all of your town halls that you have, which I greatly appreciate.
As noble as I would like to say that I am, and as good a guy as I say I am, one of the reasons I'm listening to the people is I have to listen to the people because my seat is not a safe seat.
Yours is one of the most gone after seats in the country, I believe, correct?
I'm one of 20 incumbent Democrats that is targeted by the Republican Party. I'm the number one targeted seat in New York State by the Republicans for Democrats because my seat could go either way, 50-50. So that's hard for me, but it's good for the people because it forces me to listen to all my residents because I need to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah. So in talking about, again, listening to all your residents, your town halls, I know you have them quite. What do you got? One a month? No.
Yeah. Right over 15 town halls already.
Really interested in listening to constituents. You have Heard in the Third, which is a grouping of all different the different communities that are in your district coming together to work on different issues together. Really, really awesome. One of the issues that I've seen come up, and it's certainly an issue that I'm extremely passionate about. I am one of the leading experts on Obamacare in New York State. It's a very special issue to me. I wanted to talk to you a bit about it also. So are you a Affordable Care Act supporter, or would you call yourself a single payer supporter?
Well, I'm a supporter of both. I mean, I support the Affordable Care Act.
How can you support both?
I support the Affordable. Right now, we have the Affordable Care Act, and we need to make sure that we preserve the Affordable Care Act.
Okay.
And I support the idea of single payer from an academic perspective. But right now, we don't have a plan in place that would make any sense, and we're nowhere near possible politically to do anything like that.
Why? What would have to happen in order to get that passed, other than getting the folks to sign on to agreeing to it?
Well, that's a big deal. You can't even get the most simple things done.
Sure.
We'd have to do something about gerrymandering.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's a good point.
Right now there's 330 million people in America.
Well, let me put it to you in a different way. Excuse me for a second. If you had other support around you, if you had other congressional leaders, even senators around you in our federal government that were supporting Medicare for all, single payer, Bernie's plan, and you saw that it was viable, would you support it?
Well, that's a big if. Right
Certainly.
now, there are 330 million people in America. Of those 330 million people, 160 million people get their insurance from their employer. 70 million get it from Medicare, 50 million from Medicaid, 30 million remain uninsured, and 21 million people are in the individual marketplace, which is where all the horror stories come from about skyrocketing premiums and people pulling out of the marketplace. And it's going to get a lot worse over the next several months because of things that this administration has done regarding the elimination of the individual mandate, regarding not getting rid of the CSRs, the subsidies to try and prop up these plans. We're in a lot of trouble coming forward in the next few months. That's going to get a lot worse than it's been already, and it's already been pretty bad regarding the individual marketplace. Many people in our country right now who have their insurance from their employer, while there may be a lot of people who can't stand their insurance from their employer and their contribution to their premiums are too high, or their deductibles are too high, or their co-pays are too high, a lot of people that like their insurance from their employer. Well, you can't afford to have 50 million people in America saying, what? I'm not changing the system. I like my health insurance right now. Because there are a lot of people that like their health insurance in America right now. And as soon as you try and change it, they're going to be pretty pissed off.
Well, why are we assuming that a Medicare for all plan would necessarily not be as good as the health insurance that they enjoyed previously? Medicare for all Medicare certainly doesn't come with the deductibles and co-pays that Obamacare plans typically have. So why would they be upset in any way for getting free health care?
The concern will be that people who are on Medicare will be concerned that you're changing their plan. The people that get their insurance from the Veterans Administration will be concerned that you're changing their plan. I mean, this issue has been debated pretty aggressively back in the 1950s under Harry Truman. Richard Nixon had a plan that would have made Obamacare look like a right-wing fantasy.
Okay.
You remember President Obama and Hillary Clinton had a massive debate about health care back in 2008, laying out all the different types of plans that were there.
Yeah.
If you want to change things, you need three things. First, you need the answer. And right now, the answer is not clearly defined regarding single payer. It's made a lot of progress, the stuff in New York and the different plans that have been talked about, but it's not clearly defined. But let's say we had the answer.
Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it's a good idea?
Yes.
You do?
It's a great idea.
It's a good idea.
The second
if we can
thing,
implement it, you'd be happy about that, if it was implementable.
If you could get it done. Because the second thing you need is the guts. You got to be willing to stand up to the people that want to keep the status quo the way it is. Who wants to keep the status quo the way it is?
Those insurance companies buying up pharmacies and all this stuff is crazy.
Right. They're going to spend a lot of money, as they have against Hillary Clinton, as they did against Obama. Anybody who tries to change it is going to spend a lot of money beating them up to tell you that you're ruining people's lives. And they're going to spend a lot of time and money trying to corrupt the conversation. And the third thing you need to have is the ability to win the fight. That's the whole thing. You could have the best ideas in the world, you could have all the guts in the world, but if you can't win, you're not going
No,
anywhere.
we certainly don't have too many folks out there that are ready and willing to stand up, fight for it, get the legislation passed, get the right people in office to get that legislation passed. It's a way off. It's a far cry.
You have to understand the politics. You have to understand the press.
Yeah.
You have to understand how legislation gets made. You have to understand the powerful forces that are against you, and you have to be able to be more effective than they are at getting it done. Yeah. I've been in a lot of fights over my life. I fought against the corruption in Albany and Fix Albany. I got a cap on the growth of Medicaid for the local governments in our state. I ran again for governor against Elliot Spitzer regarding our property taxes. And I had the ideas and I had the guts, but I didn't have the ability to win. I got buried in that race.
You didn't get buried in running for mayor of Glen Cove, though, and you had some time doing that, correct?
That's very different than running for governor of New York State. I mean, it didn't turn out too well for me when I ran for governor. It didn't turn out too well for Elliot Spitzer either.
How long were you mayor for? How long were you mayor of Glen Cove for?
I was mayor of Glen Cove for 8 years. I was county executive of Nassau County for 8 years. I was in the private sector before that, and in the private sector after county executive for about 7 years, and then I've been in Congress for the past 15 months or so.
The whole RXR development, which is going to be talked about quite a bit on our show, that was, you, if I remember correctly, that was initially, it changed, I know, many times since you were in office, but that was initially your project, your idea, wasn't it?
No. What's happening now is not my idea. My original
No. Like I said, it's changed many times since you.
Well, I did not make a deal with RXR at the time. I know that. Yeah. My original vision was to clean up the pollution in the area, which I did. I brought in over $100 million to clean up Superfund sites and state Superfund sites and hazardous waste sites. And my vision was to create the South Street Seaport, the Mystic Seaport, the Newport, Connecticut, the Newport, Rhode Island of Long Island, to make it a tourism destination, and to have restaurants and shops and a hotel and catering. The problem was I couldn't get a developer to invest in doing the project that way.
Yeah.
Every developer wanted to build residential. I didn't want residential because, number one, I didn't think I thought the standard of cleanup would be much higher, and I couldn't convince the federal government and state government to invest the money to clean it up because it was so unrealistic at the time. And number two, because when the residents live on that property, I was concerned that they wouldn't generate enough tax revenues. And number three, that the residents that live there would try and keep the public away from having access to the water's edge. That's my biggest desire for that property.
Running out of time, a quick yes or no question. Do you support the waterfront the way it currently is being planned?
I do not support the bonding that the city did. I think they borrowed way too much money to do improvements that will benefit the development, but they don't necessarily benefit the public as much.
Thank you, Tom, so much for coming on our show today. Please tune in again to North Shore Now on 88.1 FM and WCWP.org. Thank you again, Tom.